One morning, while leaving the apartment to put the trash in the trash, the woman finds a couple in the hallway going out for a walk. She greets them saying good morning, and the couple responds to the greeting. The man offers to take the trash and goes on his way with his wife and goes for a walk. Later, while sweeping the front of the apartment, her neighbor Pedro from before greets her saying, "Hi neighbor," and she responds and then asks if his wife Aline was here. He says no, and then praises her, saying she was delicious, and then asks when they were going to stay. Pollyanna replies that she doesn't know because of his wife. Because tonight he was going to meet her at her apartment. He soon goes home and lets her finish sweeping. Later in his apartment, while sitting in the living room, the husband wonders what excuse he would come up with for his wife to leave the house, so he has an idea and goes to the room where his wife is lying asleep. He calls her, saying she wasn't feeling very well, and says he's going to the hospital. Aline gets up worried and offers to go with him. Pedro says he doesn't need him to go alone. The wife asks if he's sure he wants to go alone, and the husband says he was sure and leaves to meet the neighbor. 2 hours later, Aline gets up and finds her husband's car keys on the counter and wonders why they were here, finding it strange that her partner didn't take them. She soon calls Peter. While she was waiting for him to answer, her husband was with the neighbor, both lying on the bed. Seeing that his cell phone was ringing and that the number was for Alina's wife, he soon answers and greets her saying, "Hi love." On the other end of the line, the worried wife asks where Pedro was. The husband replies that he was still in the emergency room, but his wife asks why. His car keys were at home. The cheater says he went to the hospital by Uber. The worried wife then asks if he was okay. He says yes, and she tells him not to take too long, and says goodbye, turning off her cell phone. At night, the cheating husband leaves his lover Pollyanna's apartment and goes home. The next day, in the apartment, the neighbor mistress feels a pain in her chest and wonders what that pain could be. Once at home, the husband takes a syringe containing sleeping pills from his pocket and adds it to his coffee for his companion to drink. When Pedro sees her consume her coffee, he kisses her and leaves the kitchen. Later, when she was lying in bed, Aline starts to feel sleepy and tells her husband that she is going to get some sleep. He watches her sleep for a few seconds and already takes out his cell phone to text Pollyanna. A few minutes later, when he was sure that everything went as he wanted, he gets up and goes to the apartment next door. Arriving there, he is questioned by his lover, who asks him how he managed to meet her. The unfaithful husband tells his mistress, who used sleeping pills to get rid of his wife for a few hours, and they both go to the bedroom. The next day, the husband does the same thing by adding sleeping pills to his wife's breakfast and leaves the kitchen. A few minutes later, he comes back to get a glass of water. When his wife sees him, she asks if Pedro is tired, and he says yes, because of work. Aline offers to give her a massage so that they can date a little, but her husband denies it, saying that he prefers to rest and goes to his room to pretend to sleep. Later the same day, Pedro, the cheating husband, tries to wake up his wife, and when he is sure she won't wake up, he gets up and leaves to meet his neighbor. The next day, while laying out the clothes in the laundry room, Pollyanna feels the pain in her chest again. After a while in front of the apartment, the betrayed wife tells her husband that she was going to buy bread and leaves. The lover, who was watching her from the crack of her apartment door, runs and closes the door, going to her cell phone to call Pedro, and while she waits for him to answer her, she had no idea that Aline had just returned because she had forgotten the money. Arriving at the room, the wife sees her husband's cell phone ringing and decides to answer the call. When she answers, she is surprised by the neighbor's voice, who says that she saw her leave and called him to her house to meet. The angry wife asks Pollyanna what she wanted with her husband. Without waiting for an answer, she puts down her cell phone and goes to make up with her neighbor. Peter, who was in the bathroom, listens to his altered wife and soon leaves to find out what could have happened. When he leaves the apartment, he sees his wife Aline knocking on Pollyanna's door, his neighbor lover, and asks what she was doing there. The betrayed wife says that he was cheating on her and asks her husband if he was not ashamed to cheat on her with her neighbor. Pedro doesn't answer her, and his wife continues to knock on the door. When he asks her to stop knocking, Aline turns to him, says she couldn't take it anymore, that she was fed up, and tells her unfaithful husband to go live his life, leaving him alone in the hallway and heading to his apartment. The other day, while walking down the street, the lover begins to feel the same pain in her chest as in the previous days and ends up feeling sick. A young man seeing her situation stops to help her and calls the ambulance. Meanwhile, her lover goes to her apartment and knocks on the door, calling her name. Intrigued by not being answered, he decides to call her and see where he was. After a few seconds, seeing that he wouldn't answer his cell phone, he ends the call and leaves. In the afternoon of the next day, when Pedro got out of the car, he was greeted by a friend who asked if he was all right. He greets his friend, saying he wasn't doing very well. Worried, Pedro's friend asks what had happened. Pedro says he was full of problems, and his friend puts that question aside and asks him if he was aware of what had happened with Pollyanna. Pedro answers no, and is already worried about his lover. His friend, without realizing his concern, says that she was dying in the hospital because Pollyanna had discovered that she had AIDS. The cheating husband is startled by the news and goes home. Arriving there, he slips through the door to the floor and screams, but in his mind, he wonders about the mistake of betraying Alina's wife and goes into despair.